All right, today we're diving into a short story, but wow, is it powerful. It's really a parable, and it gets you thinking about a pretty tough question. What does it even mean to hold onto your dignity when it feels like you've lost everything? Let's get into it. So the whole story kicks off with this one line, but it's so heavy. He gave his entire life to build that home. I mean, that tells you everything, right? This guy wasn't just, bringing home a paycheck. He was a creator. His whole life, his entire being, was poured into this one single thing, building that home for his family. Okay, so what does a life's work really mean here? The story actually breaks it down for us into these three huge pillars, and each one really shows you just how deep his sacrifice went. First up, and this is so important, he educated them. We're not just talking about putting a roof over their heads. Nope. He invested in their minds. He gave them the tools they'd need to really get out there and handle the world on their own. And it didn't stop with school. He went even further. He built their future. Think about that. This is the bigger picture stuff, right? Creating stability, opening doors for them, basically laying down this solid foundation so they could go on and build their own amazing lives. Then there's the final piece. His support didn't just end when they became adults. No way. He actually secured their careers. This shows his sacrifice followed them right into their professional lives, making sure they weren't just smart, but actually set up for success. You get the sense that for him, the job was never, ever done. So after all of that, after everything he built, every single sacrifice, the story just takes this gut-wrenching turn. I mean, this is the moment where that foundation he spent his whole life building gets completely rocked. And just look at the contrast here. It's brutal. On one side, you have what he gave, his entire life to build that home. And on the other side, what he received, that very same door shut in his face. It's such a simple and just unbelievably cruel equation. And then we get the detail that just twists the knife. It wasn't strangers who did this. It was his own children. I mean, wow. That's the part that takes this from just a sad story and makes it deeply, deeply personal. The betrayal came from the exact people he did everything for. Okay, so this is where the story, for me, gets really fascinating. It's not just about the horrible thing that happened to him. It's about how he responded. Because when he was faced with this ultimate betrayal, his reaction was all about what he didn't do. Think about this. He never complained, not once. And maybe even crazier, he never asked why. He didn't scream, he didn't demand an explanation, he didn't try to get revenge. He just took it in. He absorbed the whole awful reality of it in complete silence. But don't mistake that silence for him not feeling anything. Oh no. At night, he was awake. His heart was heavy. He was just quiet. That silence on the outside was hiding a whole storm on the inside. He was carrying this immense, crushing pain, and he was carrying it completely by himself. So that brings us to the big question, right? The question at the heart of this whole thing. Why? Why would anyone absorb that much pain in total silence? Well, to even begin to understand it, the source material points us toward a particular kind of personality archetype. And that brings us to this idea of the Sigma archetype. It's a lens for understanding his silence. Now, you hear this term thrown around a lot online these days, right? But if we use it as a tool here, it helps us see his silence not as weakness, but as a very conscious, very deliberate choice. So what is a Sigma man, anyway? Well, in this context, it's an archetype for someone who is totally self-reliant. Their sense of worth comes from the inside, They don't need anyone else's approval or validation. They operate outside the usual social games, marching to the beat of their own drum. Now, when you lay those core traits over the father's story, suddenly his silence starts to make a different kind of sense. See, if you're internally validated, you don't need to ask why. Their answer doesn't change who you are. You walk your own path, guided by your own principles. And the big one, you value your personal dignity more than you value social acceptance. And that right there, that's the absolute core of it. Dignity over everything. That's the ultimate value that's guiding his entire response. It's really the moral of the whole story. Just let this sink in. A so-called Sigma man, he can lose everything. Everything. But he never loses his dignity. That's the one thing that's non-negotiable. He could lose the house, the family he built, all of it, but he was not going to surrender that.
So, at the end of the day, his silence wasn't weakness at all. It was actually the ultimate preservation of his core self. It was an act of immense strength. By refusing to fight or beg or even ask for an explanation, he was holding on to the very last thing he had complete control over, his own self-respect.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. We live in such a noisy world, right? A world that seems to reward the loudest person in the room. This story, it asks us to think about the opposite, to consider the quiet, unbreakable power of dignity. So I'll leave you with this question. In a world full of noise, what does silent strength look like to you?